Hey all, I'm comic book creator Joe Glass, and once again welcome to my channel. This time I'm going to be reviewing a few more Kickstarter books for books which I backed on the Kickstarter crowdfunding platform. There'll be several here, some which I purchased for digital copies and some which I backed for physical copies. So some arrived in the mail, some via email, so I may not have something like to show you, or I might just pop it up in like a link here. Everything which I review I'm going to try and put links for in the bottom so that you can purchase them now if they are available now outside of the Kickstarter campaign to buy. So like I say, feel free to check them out. All of these I've loved, so like I say, they're all going to be good things. First up is Trve Kvlt. Trve Kvlt is a story about a burger franchise worker who does something a bit out of an ordinary of his usual day, which kind of throws him through a loop, and we kind of follow him through these actions and what the sort of comeuppance of that is, if we see that, and there's sort of weird things sort of all connecting into it. I don't want to give too much away because like the big thing I think about the plot was it was really surprising, and I don't want to spoil any of that. It's a lot of fun. It feels it's got really sort of Coen Brothers feel to it, so like a Coen Brothers movie but like in a comic book form, but with a sort of modern sensibility, which I just found really fun and really charming. It's also kind of got this great supernatural sort of hook possibly to it, so it's kind of got that little Ryan Murphy hook in there as well. So if you've ever thought you wanted to check out something which was Ryan Murphy meets the Coen Brothers, then this might be the book for you. I liked how the story kind of plays with the idea of cults, not just being in a literal sense in a sort of religious leaflet guy outside, but the franchise itself, and the idea of lifers within the franchise sort of almost being like brainwashed by the sort of propaganda within the franchise agreement. The story was written by Scott Brian Wilson, and it really is a superb story. It's immediately got me interested for the next part, so I'm hooked, and I think you would be too, so I highly recommend it checking out for the story alone. However, another thing which is a fantastic element for it is the art by Liana Kangas. Liana's line work is incredibly expressive and scratchy, which kind of makes everything really interesting to look at, even mundane things like a burger store employee. It kind of feels like a vinyl record. It's like listening to a vinyl record with its crackles and its pops, which kind of sometimes adds to the charm of the music itself. And it's the same with Liana's line work. It's got such character to it that you kind of feel like if it's got that vinyl feel. It's vinyl in comic form, is all I can say to it. It's trendy, it's indie, and I love it. That dynamic edginess keeps the reader's interest throughout the story, no matter what's going on, so it's really a credit to the whole comic. Her storytelling choices are absolutely superb, from the angles that panels are taken at to the facial expressions and any kind of action within the story, so she really has really outdone herself in this particular comic. This is aided through the colour work of Gab Contreras, which really adds this palette of vivid, warm colours against cooler backdrops, which makes everything kind of pop. There's also this interesting utilisation of some sort of like grain effect filter throughout the colours, which kind of adds to that sort of indie film vibe that the whole thing kind of has. The letters from DC Hopkins have a great clear style throughout, although some of the smaller whisper balloons I did find a little harder to read. Thankfully I had a digital copy of this one, so I was able to just enlarge the page wherever things were a bit more difficult, and that just might be an accessibility thing with my particular vision needs, but generally they worked really well. Everything was pretty clear. It's an expertly executed bit of lettering actually, because there's certain elements where it really fits with the story flow, and really aids with it. For example, there's one scene where the character's kind of losing attention from the person in front of him, so the person in front of him continues to talk. However, the character is sort of off center rather, and the lettering sort of then takes down the center, and it kind of adds to this element of being able to hear something when it's no longer your focus. So it really worked really well. So I'd have to say the lettering overall is fantastic, with just that slight nitpicky element that I maybe want to try and sort of adjust slightly. Overall, Trve Kvlt is a fantastic book. Like I say, I highly recommend it. I'm pretty certain you can get it online. I'm going to pop any links down below so that you can. So I would really say check it out because it's really superb, and these are all a bunch of new creators who I really think you've got to keep your eyes on because they're going to be doing huge stuff. If not already. I mean, Liana's already doing Star Wars, so what can I say? Next up, we have Fanny Galactic and Tucked to the Future. This is a really fun story. It's by Trve Kvlt, is the story creator and writer. It's filled with nice gags throughout. It's very much going for that comedy feel. For anyone who doesn't know the story, it's generally about this drag queen named Fanny Galactic she's very much a focal element in the drag community where she is at the moment, much to the chagrin of a couple of other rival drag queens. Somehow she finds herself thrown into the future, which is now a dystopian world ruled by an evil drag queen. As you can imagine, it's filled with sort of tongue-in-cheek humour, and it just works really well. The story has a rollicking steamroller momentum which just takes you from beginning to end in nobody's business. It's really, really fast. I would say that the story could have potentially benefited from a little bit more length on some of the quieter moments to give the exposition a little bit more time to breathe, but generally it all works. It goes from beginning to end pretty quickly. It's a nice little story. It's really funny, and I really can't recommend it enough. Artwork in this is handled, along with the letters actually, by Edward Bentley. His art has this kind of pop art, slightly Michael already kind of vibe to it. It's filled with fantastic, great character designs, and it all works with the story incredibly well. It absolutely sets the tone perfectly. He has great eye for character expression as well, which even in this slightly simplified elements of the pop arty style work really well, and he gets things across exceptionally well. So I can't recommend the book enough. It was a really fun read. I really enjoyed it. So that was Fanny Galactic, Tuck to the Future, which you will find any links I can find below. Next up is Future by Tom Woodman, Rupert Smithson and Trve Kvlt. This book's great. I mean, like, just from production value alone, the hardcover just looks absolutely stunning. I believe this was done by Comics Printing UK, who's really outdone themselves on this particular print style. The nice little sort of spot flourish of foil on there as well just makes for an overall gorgeous package. But obviously what you're here for is the story and the art, and I will tell you all about them. Mainly the story from Tom Woodman is incredibly moving. It's a really great story. It's got this really strong, powerful emotional core to it, which really sells the whole thing. It kind of feels like a nice Hollywood sci-fi drama, or possibly even a Netflix one. We just had one recently which kind of has a similar feel to it, but I gotta admit this was a lot better. So highly recommend checking out Future as opposed to that film whose name I can't even remember, so that kind of gives you a lot, doesn't it? You're getting like a true sort of story focusing on the emotional core of things as opposed to the wider goings on. So despite the fact that there is this big story about the future and this sort of big sci-fi element taking place, it's got this really tight and powerful core to it which really does move you. There's also an interesting environmentalist message to the story, which works really well in that it doesn't sort of feels like it's soapboxing at all. It doesn't feel like it's overriding the emotional core. The story feels still very much about the main characters and their relationship, without actually sort of taking away from that. It still gives you this idea of, you know, how humanity sort of putting itself in danger by ruining the world around it. To give a brief gist of the story, it is about this couple, Kay and Murray, who are sort of together. Murray is unfortunately terminally ill, and the world around them is basically our world in 20 years time. It's a complete ecological disaster. We are like decades away from destruction, and the only hope that they have is to slingshot themselves into the future with the hope of finding out how humanity survived. From there, like I say, I'm not going to say anymore because I don't want to spoil anything, but as you can imagine, things don't go quite to plan. It's an interesting exploration from there of this couple's fight for a future when the world is against them. They are, by the way, a queer couple. They're two women, and instead of making it about the fact that they're queer and the world is against them because they're queer, instead it's because of something which is another thing which is taken out of their hands, which is obviously the health of one of them. It makes for a very powerful and accessible way of reading it, because at the end of the day, anyone can relate to that. You know, you don't have to be a queer person to understand that kind of thing. Like, anyone has health issues. Nearly everyone's experienced someone who's had cancer in their lives, and this has a really powerful way of getting right to the heart of things. I'd say I'd be genuinely surprised if you didn't find yourself tearing up at least once when reading it. Smithson's artwork throughout is fantastic. Everything is clear. The characters feel like individual of themselves. Like, they kind of, you kind of fall in love with their little expressions and their sort of general sort of the way they act and the way their faces sort of light up when they see each other. and it really works. It's really well illustrated in that way. The other thing I found fantastic throughout was the use of panels throughout the whole story. Panels aren't just broken down in an excellent way to tell the story. Everything flows incredibly well, but occasionally the gutters and the actual panel breaks are used as elements of the story. Like one element which really stood out to me was when the window panes of an actual window in the story essentially became the panels. So you saw actions happening behind that window and another character in front of them. So it was really interesting. It was a really fun way of playing with the form. It's an exceptionally economical use of the space. You're never inundated with tons of panels to get across tons of information. Instead, you sort of get everything you need through a fairly sparse use of panels. Aditya Pitka's lettering is superb throughout. It's incredibly clear, it works incredibly well with the themes of the stories, and there's some excellent choices in balloon shape and colour usage, which makes everyone's voices feel really individual. Overall, Future is a gorgeous book with a really wonderful story. I really can't recommend it highly enough. It's really superb. I believe it was Tom Woodman's debut story, and really it's a tremendous debut to make. So I really recommend checking it out. I'm going to put any links I find down below, so please go check them out and please grab a copy. It's always best to support new creators. In fact, I would say this of all the creators involved in this particular review, absolutely please support them. Please buy their books if any of them sound at all of interest to you. You are really helping out who could be the next big comic book writers of any of your favorite books, or even create something which you fall in love by and of itself. So that's it for this particular video. I hope you enjoyed the reviews. Obviously, if you did enjoy the video, please give me a like. Please subscribe for all future reviews and all video content from me on Joe Glass Comics. I also have a new Kickstarter of my own starting in a few weeks. You can actually hit the landing page now to be notified as soon as the Kickstarter begins by following the link below. So yeah, please like, subscribe, follow that link and hit notification for that too. And I'll see you for the next review shortly. Thanks very much now. Love you all.